We are watching the largest geopolitical transfer of the 21st century unfold in real time, and almost nobody sees it. Donald Trump's Greenland deal isn't just a land purchase. It's the final confirmation of a pattern that has repeated across every dominant empire in recorded history. A pattern that always ends the same way. Total restructuring of global power. And right now, in 2025, we're entering stage 3, the point of no return. Here's what you need to understand. NATO just lost its northern anchor. The United States just bypassed every treaty obligation it signed in the last 70 years. And Greenland, the single most strategically valuable landmass on Earth, is about to become the center of the next Cold War. This isn't speculation. This is systemic inevitability. And if you don't understand the pattern, you won't see what's coming next. Let me show you the mechanism. Every dominant power in history follows the same 4-stage cycle. Stage 1 is foundation. A nation or empire builds dominance through strategic positioning, military superiority, or resource control. They establish treaties, alliances, security guarantees. They create the rules of the game. This is where empires plant their flag, where they establish legitimacy, where they convince the world that their dominance is natural, inevitable, beneficial to all. The foundation stage is about building trust, building systems, building dependencies. Other nations align with the dominant power because it serves their interests. Protection, trade access, financial stability. The dominant power provides something valuable, and in return they get influence, control, the ability to shape the global order according to their preferences. This stage can last decades, sometimes centuries, but it always contains the seeds of its own destruction, because every foundation eventually cracks under the weight of what gets built on top of it. Stage 2 is expansion. The dominant power extends its influence beyond sustainable limits. They overcommit militarily, economically, diplomatically. They promise protection they can't deliver. They guarantee security they can't afford. This is the imperial overreach phase. The dominant power looks at a map and sees gaps, regions where rivals might gain influence, resources they don't yet control, strategic positions that could threaten their dominance if left to competitors. So they expand. They make new commitments, sign new treaties, deploy more troops, build more bases. And at first, it works. The expansion looks like strength. It looks like the natural extension of their power, but underneath, the math is changing. Every new commitment requires resources, money, military assets, political capital. And there's always a limit. The dominant power reaches a point where the cost of maintaining their commitments exceeds their ability to generate resources. But they can't admit it, because admitting weakness invites challenge. So they keep expanding, they keep promising, they keep pretending the system is sustainable until something breaks. Stage 3 is crisis. The overextension becomes visible. Allies lose confidence. Rivals sense weakness. The dominant power makes a desperate move to reassert control. They break their own rules. They abandon old commitments to secure new advantages. This is the most dangerous stage, because the dominant power still has massive strength. They still have military capability, economic leverage, the ability to project force. But they're losing the moral authority that made their dominance acceptable. They're violating the very rules they established, and that creates chaos. Allies who trusted the system start hedging their bets. Rivals who feared the dominant power start testing boundaries. Neutral parties start choosing sides. The world fractures. And the dominant power, instead of accepting decline gracefully, doubles down. They make aggressive moves. They take risks. They prioritize short-term wins over long-term stability. Because they're terrified. They can see the pattern. They can feel the system slipping away. So they grab whatever they can while they still have the strength to grab it. Stage 4 is restructuring. The old system collapses. New powers rise, the global order resets, and the dominant power either adapts or falls. This is the resolution. The restructuring can be violent or peaceful. It can be quick or gradual, but it's always transformative. The rules that govern the previous era disappear. New rules emerge. New alliances form. New power centers establish themselves. And the former dominant power has to find a new role. Some adapt successfully. They accept reduced status, but maintain influence in specific domains. Others resist. They cling to the old system. They refuse to acknowledge reality, and they collapse completely. Stage 4 is inevitable when Stage 3 begins. The only variable is how painful the transition will be. This pattern has repeated without exception. And it's not a theory. It's verified historical fact. Let me prove it to you. 3 times in modern history. 3 perfect examples. Same pattern, same stages, same outcome. Example 1, Britain and the Suez Crisis, 1956. Britain had spent 2 centuries building the largest empire the world had ever seen. Stage 1 complete. They controlled global trade routes, colonies on every continent, the world's reserve currency. The British pound was the foundation of international finance. The Royal Navy was the guarantor of global shipping security. Britain established the rules: free trade under British protection, colonial administration that extracted resources and created markets, a global system that funneled wealth back to London. And it worked. For generations, Britain was the undisputed superpower of the 19th century. No rival could match their reach, their influence, their economic might. Then came stage two: overextension. World War I devastated Britain's finances. They borrowed heavily from the United States. They lost an entire generation of young men, but they maintained the empire. They even expanded it, taking former German colonies in Africa and the Middle East, taking control of Palestine, Iraq, Jordan. Britain emerged from World War I technically victorious, but fundamentally weakened. The debt was unsustainable. The empire was too large to defend, but they couldn't admit it. So they kept going. They made new commitments, promised security to new territories, and then World War II hit. The final blow. Britain fought heroically. They stood alone against Nazi Germany for a year, but it broke them, financially, militarily, psychologically. By 1945, Britain was bankrupt, dependent on American loans, losing colonies to independence movements. India went in 1947, the jewel of the empire. Gone. But Britain still pretended. They still acted like a great power. They still made security guarantees they couldn't fulfill. The overextension was complete. Then stage 3 hit. Egypt nationalized the Suez Canal, July 1956. President Gamal Abdel Nasser announced that Egypt was taking control of the canal. Britain's lifeline to Asia, India, oil from the Middle East. Britain couldn't let it go. The canal was too important, too symbolic. Losing it meant admitting they were no longer a great power. So they invaded, alongside France and Israel. October 1956. They violated the United Nations Charter. They ignored American warnings. They broke the post-war rules they helped create. Prime Minister Anthony Eden thought it would be quick. A military operation to secure the canal and topple Nasser. The British military performed well. They took their objectives. But the backlash was immediate. The United States was furious. President Eisenhower demanded withdrawal. He threatened to crash the pound, to cut off oil supplies, to withdraw support for British debt. The Soviet Union threatened intervention. The entire world condemned Britain. And Eden had no choice. Britain withdrew, humiliated, defeated. Not by Egypt, by the realization that they no longer had the power to act unilaterally. And what happened? Stage 4, or restructuring. The pound collapsed. Britain's global influence evaporated overnight. Within a decade, most of the remaining empire was gone. Africa, Asia, the Caribbean, all independent. Britain became a secondary power, a close American ally, a financial hub, but never again a superpower. The old system died. A new one replaced it. America took over as the dominant Western power. The British learned to operate within the new reality. They adapted. But the empire was finished forever. Check. Verified. Undeniable. Example 2. The Soviet Union and Afghanistan. 1979. The USSR had spent decades building a massive sphere of influence across Eastern Europe, Central Asia, Africa. Stage 1, locked in. After World War II, the Soviet Union emerged as one of two superpowers. They controlled Eastern Europe through military occupation and puppet governments. They built the Warsaw Pact as a counterweight to NATO. They guaranteed security to communist states worldwide: Cuba, North Korea, Vietnam, Angola, Ethiopia, Mozambique. The Soviets provided military aid, economic support, ideological backing. They were the alternative to American capitalism, the protector of socialist revolution. And for decades it worked. The Soviet economy grew. Their military rivaled America's. They achieved nuclear parity. They launched the first satellite, the first human in space. They looked unstoppable. Then came stage 2, overextension. By the late 70s, the Soviet economy was stagnating. Central planning was inefficient. Innovation was slow. Consumer goods were scarce. But the military commitments kept growing. The Soviets were subsidizing failing regimes across 3 continents. Cuba alone cost billions of rubles annually. Vietnam needed constant support. The African regimes were expensive and strategically marginal, and the Soviet people were starting to notice. Living standards weren't improving. The gap with the West was widening. But the Kremlin couldn't pull back, because pulling back meant admitting socialism wasn't working. It meant letting American influence expand. It meant ideological defeat. So they kept going, kept spending, kept overcommitting. The military budget consumed a quarter of GDP, maybe more. Nobody knows the exact numbers, but it was unsustainable. Then came stage 2, overextension. The 90s and early 2000s saw endless interventions. Somalia, 1993, a humanitarian mission that turned into urban warfare. 18 American soldiers killed in Mogadishu. Bosnia, 1995. NATO intervention in the Yugoslav wars. American troops deployed to keep peace in the Balkans. Kosovo, 1999. NATO bombing of Serbia without UN authorization. Then, September 11th, 2001 happened. Al-Qaeda attacked America, and the response was massive. Afghanistan, October 2001. The U.S. invaded to destroy Al-Qaeda and topple the Taliban. It worked quickly, but then the mission expanded. Nation building, democracy promotion, counterinsurgency. American troops were still there 2 decades later. The military was stretched. The budget was ballooning. And allies were starting to question American judgment, the doctrine of preemptive war, the willingness to act unilaterally, the confidence that military force could solve complex political problems. Europe was skeptical, but America was confident, still powerful, still dominant. Then stage 3, Iraq. The Bush administration wanted Saddam Hussein gone. They believed he had weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons, biological weapons, a nuclear program. They believed he was connected to terrorism. They believed removing him would transform the Middle East. Democracy would spread, American influence would expand, allies would fall in line, so they pushed for war. The United Nations inspectors found nothing. France, Germany, Russia all opposed military action. NATO was divided, but America didn't care. They assembled a coalition of the willing, Britain, Spain, Poland, a few others, and they invaded. March 2003. No UN authorization, no NATO consensus, no weapons of mass destruction. The initial invasion was swift. Baghdad fell in weeks. Saddam's regime collapsed. Mission accomplished. Except it wasn't. Iraq descended into chaos, sectarian violence, insurgency, foreign fighters. American troops were dying. The occupation dragged on. Years turned into a decade. Thousands of American soldiers dead. Tens of thousands wounded. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis killed. Trillions of dollars spent. And the justification was false. No weapons of mass destruction. No connection to 9/11. The credibility of American intelligence was shattered. The credibility of American leadership was shattered. And what happened? Stage 4 began. Restructuring. China rose during America's distraction. They invested in infrastructure, technology, military modernization. They became the world's factory, then the world's largest trading partner for most nations. Russia reasserted itself. Georgia in 2008. Crimea in 2014. They tested American resolve and found it lacking. The unipolar moment ended. American dominance started to crack. Allies pursued independent policies. Europe built its own institutions. Asia hedged between America and China. The Middle East fragmented. American credibility never fully recovered. The rules-based international order that America championed looked increasingly fragile because America had broken its own rules. Check. Verified. Undeniable. 3 examples. Same pattern. Same stages. Same outcome. And now it's happening again. Right now. With Greenland. Let me show you how the pattern applies. Stage 1. Foundation. The United States built NATO in 1949. Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. A defensive alliance to contain Soviet expansion. They guaranteed security to Western Europe, Canada, Iceland, Greenland, through Denmark. The North Atlantic Treaty was the foundation of post-war security. America provided nuclear deterrence, conventional forces, economic aid through the Marshall Plan, and in return they got influence, bases, allies, a united front against communism. Greenland became strategically critical during the Cold War. It sits between North America and Europe, 1,500 miles from both. It controls access to the Arctic Ocean, to the North Atlantic, to the gap between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, where Soviet submarines would have to pass to reach the Atlantic. The GIUK Gap, one of the most important strategic choke points in the world. The U.S. built Thule Air Base in 1951, the northernmost American military installation. Early warning systems for Soviet missiles, radar installations that could detect bombers, submarines. Later, ballistic missile tracking, space surveillance. Thule was the eyes of American defense. Without it, the continental United States would have had minutes less warning of a Soviet nuclear attack. Greenland was the northern anchor of NATO's defensive perimeter. And for 70 years, that system held. America protected Greenland, Denmark administered it. Greenlanders had autonomy, but not independence. NATO's northern flank was secure. The Arctic remained militarized, but stable. Everyone knew the rules, everyone followed them. Then stage 3. Afghanistan descended into chaos, April 1978. A communist coup overthrew the Afghan government. The new regime was brutal, unpopular. Within months, rebellions broke out across the country. The Afghan communists were losing control, and the Soviets couldn't afford to lose a communist ally on their border. It would embolden Islamic movements in Soviet Central Asia. It would look like weakness to America and China. So they invaded. December 1979, 80,000 troops, the largest Soviet military operation since World War II. They thought it would be quick. Install a stable regime, crush the rebels, withdraw. It wasn't. The Afghan resistance was fierce, supported by the United States, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia. Advanced weapons flowed to the Mujahideen, Stinger missiles, anti-tank weapons. The Soviets were fighting an unwinnable war, 10 years, 15,000 Soviet soldiers dead, hundreds of thousands of Afghans killed, billions of rubles burned, international condemnation. The Soviet Union became a pariah state, and the war drained the last reserves of economic and political strength. And then stage 4, restructuring. Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in 1985. He saw the reality. The system was broken. He tried to reform it. Glasnost, perestroika, openness, restructuring. But it was too late. The Soviet economy collapsed. Eastern Europe broke away. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany. The Berlin Wall fell in 1989. The Warsaw Pact dissolved. And finally, the Soviet Union itself disintegrated. December 1991, 15 republics became independent nations. The Cold War ended. The global order reset. Russia lost its superpower status for a generation. The Soviet Union didn't adapt. It collapsed completely. Check, verified, undeniable. Example 3, the United States and Iraq, 2003. By the end of the Cold War, America was the uncontested global superpower. Stage 1 complete. The Soviet Union was gone. China was still developing. Europe was fragmented. America had military bases on every continent, security guarantees to over 50 nations, control over global financial systems. The dollar was unchallenged as the reserve currency. American culture dominated global media. Hollywood, Silicon Valley, Wall Street. The world ran on American systems, American rules, American preferences. And it seemed permanent. Political scientists talked about the unipolar moment, the end of history. Liberal democracy had won, free markets had won, American dominance was the natural state of the world. So Trump offers them something Denmark can't. Massive infrastructure investment, rare earth mineral development, permanent American military presence, upgraded airports, ports, roads, schools, hospitals, economic development that would transform Greenland overnight. And possibly a path to joining the United States, not as a territory, as a state. Full representation, full rights. The 51st star on the flag. For Greenland's 57,000 people, this is transformative. They're currently dependent on Danish subsidies, $600 million a year. Their economy is small, based on fishing and shrimp exports. They have massive potential wealth in rare earths and minerals, but no capacity to develop it alone. Denmark won't invest at the scale needed. China offered to invest, but Denmark blocked it for security reasons. So Greenland is stuck until Trump offers a way out. And Greenland's government is listening because they see the same pattern. They know America is pulling back from Europe. They know NATO is fracturing. They know Denmark can't defend them if Russia or China makes a move. Denmark's military is tiny. 15,000 active personnel, a handful of ships, no strategic depth. If Russia wanted Greenland, Denmark couldn't stop them. Only America could. So Greenland is making a calculation. Partner with America directly. Secure investment and protection. Gain real independence. Or stay with Denmark and remain strategically vulnerable and economically stagnant. The details of the deal are still emerging. But the structure is clear. America wants Greenland. Greenland wants development and security. Denmark is being bypassed. And NATO is watching in horror. Because if this deal happens, it breaks everything. Denmark is a founding NATO member, one of the original 12. Greenland is Danish territory under international law. For America to negotiate directly with Greenland's government without Danish consent is a violation of sovereignty. It's a violation of alliance norms. It's a unilateral action that ignores 75 years of partnership. And it signals something terrifying. America will act in its own interest, regardless of allied concerns. The rules don't matter anymore. This is stage 3, the desperate power play. America can't afford to lose the Arctic to China or Russia. The Arctic is opening up faster than anyone predicted. Sea ice extent has declined 40% since 1980. Shipping routes that were frozen year-round are now passable for months. The Northern Sea Route along Russia's Arctic coast could cut transit time from Shanghai to Rotterdam by 14 days compared to the Suez Canal route. 40% faster, 40% cheaper. Trillions of dollars in trade will eventually flow through the Arctic. And Greenland sits right in the middle. Whoever controls Greenland controls access. They control the choke points. They control the resources. Because the Arctic also contains vast untapped reserves. Oil, natural gas, rare earth minerals, zinc, lead, gold, diamonds. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates the Arctic holds 13% of the world as undiscovered oil and 30% of undiscovered natural gas. Greenland alone may have significant offshore oil deposits and the rare earths. Greenland has some of the largest rare earth deposits outside China. Neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, essential for magnets in electric vehicles, wind turbines, electronics, military systems. China currently controls over 70% of global rare earth mining and 90% of processing. They've weaponized this monopoly before. They can do it again. Securing Greenland means breaking that monopoly. It means resource independence for America and its allies. So Trump is making the move. He's securing the Arctic while America still has the leverage to do it. He's bypassing Denmark because Denmark would never agree willingly. He's ignoring NATO protocols because NATO would try to stop him. He's acting unilaterally because multilateralism is too slow and too constrained. This is exactly what Stage 3 looks like. A dominant power breaking its own rules to secure a critical advantage before it's too late. And the consequences will be catastrophic for the alliance system. Check, verified, undeniable. Because here's what happens next. Denmark protests. They appeal to NATO. They demand a special council meeting, Article 4 consultations. They argue this violates the North Atlantic Treaty, that it undermines collective security, that it sets a dangerous precedent. And they're right. But what can NATO do? Expel the United States? Impossible. NATO without America is meaningless. Sanction America? With what leverage? Europe depends on American security guarantees even as those guarantees erode. Condemn America publicly? That would fracture the alliance beyond repair. So NATO will do nothing. Some members will privately support America, Poland, the Baltics. They want American strength even if it comes with unilateralism. Others will condemn it, France, Germany. They'll push harder for European strategic autonomy. And the alliance will hollow out from within. The cohesion that made NATO effective will disappear, replaced by a loose coalition of nations with diverging interests and declining trust. And that triggers Stage 4, restructuring. Europe will accelerate its own defense integration. The European Defense Fund, permanent structured cooperation, a common European defense budget. They'll build capabilities independent of America, not to oppose America, but to hedge against American unreliability. France will lead this effort. They have nuclear weapons, a permanent UN Security Council seat, global military reach. Germany will provide the economic weight. Poland and the Baltics will provide the urgency. And within a decade, Europe will have a functional defense force that operates separately from NATO, not replacing it, but supplementing it, preparing for a world where America is distracted or absent. Meanwhile, Russia and China will exploit the chaos. Russia will increase pressure on the Baltics, cyber attacks, propaganda, support for Russian minorities, testing whether NATO still functions. China will accelerate its belt and road expansion into Europe. Infrastructure investments, technology partnerships, trade agreements. They'll offer what America won't: patient capital, no political conditions, long-term partnerships. And European nations will take the deals, not because they trust China, but because they need alternatives. The global order will fragment, not into Cold War blocs, but into competing spheres of influence. An American sphere centered on North America, the Arctic, parts of Asia, maybe Britain. A European sphere centered on the EU. A Chinese sphere across Asia and into Africa and Latin America. A Russian sphere across parts of the former Soviet Union. These spheres will overlap, compete, occasionally cooperate. But the unified Western order led by America will be gone, finished, and the Greenland deal will be remembered as the moment it became irreversible. This is Stage 4, and it's not distant future speculation. It's happening now. The Greenland negotiations are real. The strategic logic is undeniable. The pattern is unfolding exactly as it always has, and most people still don't see it. They think it's a negotiating tactic. They think it won't actually happen. They're wrong. This is the next phase of imperial transition, and it's locked in. Now let me address the inevitable objections, because I can hear them already. This time is different. America is too powerful. The dollar is too entrenched. Technology will save us. American exceptionalism is real. Let me dismantle each one systematically. First, this time is different. No, it's never different. Every dominant power in history thought their situation was unique. The British thought their empire was divinely ordained. The white man's burden, civilizing the world. They thought their naval supremacy was permanent. Their financial systems unshakable. They were wrong. The Soviets thought scientific socialism was historically inevitable, that capitalism would collapse under its own contradictions, that their system represented the future. They were wrong. The Americans thought the end of history had arrived, that liberal democracy was the final form of human government, that free markets would spread prosperity and peace globally. They were wrong. The pattern doesn't care about your ideology. It doesn't care about your technology. It doesn't care about your sense of destiny. Overextension leads to crisis. Crisis leads to restructuring. Always. Second, America is too powerful to decline. This misunderstands how power works. Power is relative, context-dependent, time-limited. Yes, America has the world's strongest military. But can they fight wars on 3 fronts simultaneously? Can they defend Taiwan and Ukraine and the Middle East all at once? No, they're already struggling. Yes, America has the largest economy in nominal terms, but in purchasing power parity, China's economy is larger. And the gap is closing in nominal terms too. By 2030, China's economy will likely exceed America's in every measure. Yes, America has technological advantages, but those advantages are narrowing. China leads in 5G deployment. They're competitive in artificial intelligence. They dominate manufacturing for everything from solar panels to batteries to drones. American power is real, but it's declining relative to competitors, and that's what matters. Third, the dollar is the reserve currency, so America is protected. The dollar's reserve status is eroding faster than most people realize. In 2000, the dollar represented 71% of global foreign exchange reserves. Today, it's 58% and falling. Central banks are diversifying: the euro, the yuan, gold, even smaller currencies. Bilateral trade agreements are bypassing the dollar entirely. China and Russia trade in yuan and rubles. India and Russia use rupees. The BRICS nations are discussing a common currency specifically to reduce dollar dependence. And once the tipping point is reached, the transition accelerates. Because reserve currency status is about trust and network effects. If enough participants lose trust, the network collapses. And when it does, America loses the exorbitant privilege of printing money the world accepts. They lose the ability to finance deficits cheaply. Interest rates spike, inflation surges, the economic model breaks. Fourth, technology will save us. This is the most seductive and dangerous myth. Yes, America leads in certain technologies, but technology requires inputs, rare earth minerals, semiconductors, advanced manufacturing. America doesn't control these inputs anymore. They offshored manufacturing to China over 3 decades. They allowed supply chains to become completely dependent on foreign production. And now they're trying to reshore. But it takes time, money, skills they no longer have. Meanwhile, China has been building redundancy into their own supply chains. They're developing domestic semiconductor capabilities. They're securing rare earth supplies globally. They're investing in next-generation technologies. The technology gap is closing. And once it closes, America's remaining advantage disappears. So no, this time is not different. The pattern holds. And we're watching it play out in real time with Greenland as the catalyst. Now let's talk about what you should do with this information. Because understanding the pattern isn't enough. You need to position yourself for what comes next. Stage 4 is restructuring. And restructuring creates massive opportunities and massive risks. Here's your action plan. First, diversify geographically. If you're entirely invested in American assets, you're overexposed. Spread your investments across regions. European equities in sectors that will benefit from rearmament and infrastructure spending. Asian markets focused on technology and manufacturing. Latin American resources. Don't abandon American investments, but don't concentrate them either. The goal is resilience across multiple economic zones. Second, commodities become critical. Rare earths, lithium, cobalt, copper, nickel. The electrification of the global economy is happening regardless of geopolitics. But the fight over who controls the resources is intensifying. Invest in companies that mine these materials, that process them, that have secured supply chains, energy commodities too. Oil, natural gas, uranium. The green transition will take decades. During that time, traditional energy remains essential. Third, gold, always gold. Every historical restructuring sees gold appreciate. It's nobody's liability. It's universally recognized. It's the ultimate hedge against currency instability and geopolitical chaos. If the dollar loses reserve status, gold will surge. If NATO collapses and conflict intensifies, gold will surge. Either way, hold gold. Physical if possible. ETFs if necessary. But have exposure. Fourth, supply chain resilience. Companies that have diversified manufacturing, that aren't dependent on single countries or regions, that have invested in redundancy. These companies will outperform because globalization is reversing. The Greenland deal is part of a larger trend toward resource nationalism, toward securing critical inputs within controlled territories. Companies that adapt will thrive. Those that don't will struggle. Fifth, defense and security. European defense stocks, American defense contractors, cybersecurity firms, satellite and surveillance technology, space systems. The restructuring of global order means increased military spending. Europe is already rearming. Asia is militarizing. Even neutral countries are increasing defense budgets. The companies that provide these capabilities will see sustained growth. Sixth, Arctic exposure. This is the new frontier. Shipping companies that can operate in Arctic waters, port infrastructure in Arctic regions, resource extraction in Arctic territories. These are long-term plays, but the trajectory is clear. The Arctic is opening. Whoever positions early wins big. And finally, stay liquid. Keep cash available. Because restructuring creates volatility. Asset prices will swing wildly. Having dry powder to deploy during dislocations is critical. The best opportunities will appear when everyone else is panicking. So here's the bottom line. The Greenland deal is not a random land grab. It's not Trump being erratic. It's the confirmation of stage 3. The desperate move by a dominant power to reassert control before it's too late. It's the violation of alliance norms, the bypass of traditional partners, the unilateral action that signals the old system is dead. And what comes next is stage 4, the restructuring, the fragmentation of NATO, the rise of independent European defense, the acceleration of great power competition in the Arctic and globally, the erosion of dollar dominance, the reset of the entire international order. This is not speculation. This is pattern recognition. And the pattern has never failed, not once in recorded history. So the only question that matters is whether you're prepared, whether you understand what's coming, whether you've positioned yourself to survive and thrive through the transition. Because stage 4 is coming. The Greenland deal has started the countdown, and when the restructuring accelerates, there won't be time to adjust. The opportunities will be gone, the risks will be unavoidable, and the people who saw the pattern will be the only ones who made it through intact. So subscribe right now. Watch the next video where I break down exactly which sectors will benefit from Arctic competition, which companies are positioned to dominate rare earth processing, which defense contractors will see the biggest growth, which currencies will survive the dollar's decline. This is just the beginning. The pattern is accelerating, and every day you wait is a day you fall further behind. The Greenland deal is the signal. Now you know what it means. Now act on it.